All right, welcome to day 4 of review. Homework will be finishing whatever we don't finish in the video for pages 14 to 16. So from day 3, number 7, we had an independence one. So probability of A times probability of B is equal to probability of A and B. So the first thing we want is high school graduate. So the only box that represents high school graduate only is the 310 over the overall total. Then look for owns a home. The only box that only represents homeowner is the 340 out of the total 500. And then the crisscross of those. If you look at the high school graduate homeowner, those crisscross at 221, so that's over on the right. Type in both sides, including the side on the right, because sometimes it reduces. Compare them. If they are exactly the same, then that's independent. We found that they were not the same, so we had dependent. You do need to show that work. You can't just have that top row and say dependent. You got to show the left and right are not the same. For 8, do your mean of each of those. You got 26.3 and 32.6. Then find the difference. They asked us to do group 2 minus group 1, so you got 6.3. 6.3 is roughly where that arrow is. We always look there and to the outside. The simulation was out of 100. So it looks like there's 3 out of 100. If it's less than or equal to 5%, then what we are testing is statistically significant. So there was a statistically significant difference between our two samples. All right, we're going to be on page 14 and we will need calculators out. So we'll give you a moment to flip there and to have your calculators out. So today's stuff is from our most recent unit, so it'll probably be all very familiar. So the first one, we just want to graph it. Now we saw these in the unit half the time with no calculator, which made it more challenging, but because you got your calculator on the whole final, that should make it a bit easier. We don't have any shifts left or right, so we'll put 0 as our middle number, and then we'll pick the 2x values after it and the 2x values before it. From there, we can go to a graphs page and hit Control T. So we'll give you a moment to go to that graphs page and then get your table up. So for the -2, we should have 0.037. Another change. For the -1, which would be the same as 1/9, we get 0.11 repeating. For 0, we get 0.3 repeating, which is the same as a third. And then from 1, we get 1, and 2, we get 3. So you're welcome to do that by hand if you want, but you do have the calculator available to you. From here, we're going to draw in our x and y axis. I'm going to put my y axis fairly low because we have no negative y's. We want to make sure to always label our x and y axis. -2.037 is going to be very, very close to the x-axis. The -1.11 will still be really close to the x-axis. The 0.3 we're finally starting to come off. 1, and then, oh, I wrote the wrong thing there. That's supposed to be 2, 3. Sorry about that. Otherwise, that's not exponential. So 1, and then 2, 3. Once we have our points, connect them with a nice smooth curve. Make sure you have arrows on both ends, and we want to label our equation. All right, we are going to pause the video for 4 minutes for you to do question 2. All right, no shifts left or right, so you can start with 0 as the middle number. For your y's, you got 24, 12, 6, 3, and 1.5. Remember we talked about when we had this in our unit that if one of those ends up being off the graph, that's fine as long as you have 4 of them to plot. I put my x-axis quite low because there were no negative y values. Make sure you have arrows on your graph, label on your equation, label on x and y axis. All right, next one. We've got a table, we want to find the equation. Well, if we look at our rate of change, when you go 54 to 18, 18 to 6, 6 to 2, and so on, that is not a constant rate of change. So that rules out linear. So we must be working with exponential then. Those were the two main types of functions we worked with. Exponential, our general form is y equals a times b to the x. Now from a table, if there was going to be any shifts up or down, they would have had to tell us. So we can assume there's no shifts up or down, meaning our y-intercept will be our a value. So we're going to have y equals 6 times b to the x. And then pick another point to sub in the x and y. I'm going to make life as easy as possible, and I'm going to use the point 1, 2. So I'll put the 2 in for y, and I'll put the 1 in for x. So if I divide the 6 over, 2 divided by 6 will give us 1/3, and b to the first is just b. We now know our a and b values, so we'll just have y equals 6 times 1/3 raised to the x. All right, we are going to pause for 6 minutes for you to do the next 2 problems. So do both questions 4 and 5. Okay, so in number 4, we had -2 as the a value because that was our y-intercept. I chose to make life easy and subbed in the 1 and -1 for x and y. You eventually get b is a half, so we have y equals -2 times 1/2 to the x. Something I forgot to mention on the other question, but I'll mention now. These questions are super easy to check your answer. Once you have an equation, just go to a graphs page and put your equation in and do Control T and see if your table from the problem matches your table in the calculator. If it matches exactly, then you are guaranteed that you did that question correctly. So I would suggest you check that as we review these in class, or if you get one of these on the final exam, you will know when you hand in your final exam if you got a question like this, whether it's correct or not. Next one, a value was 1/27. I went with 1 and 1/9 for my x and y. Just be careful when dividing the 1/27 over. Make sure you get the 1/9 all in the numerator, the 1/27 in the denominator. I prefer to do the control divide fraction template. And then in the numerator, do another control divide to get 1/9, denominator control divide to get 1/27, just to make sure everything's in the right spots. So you get b is 3, so you have y equals 1/27 times 3 to the x. All right, our next one, 6, basically the same type of problem, just it's coming from a graph. So we've got our y-intercept is -4, so that would give us y equals -4 times b to the x. Really, the only difference here is we don't have a whole table of points to pick from. We only have one other point. So sometimes that could force us into a more challenging point to work with than we saw on the previous problems, but it's still essentially the same idea. So we're going to sub our 2 in for x and -16 in for y. If we divide our -4 over, we'll get 4 equals b squared. We'll take the square root of both sides. Now, normally when we take a square root, you need to put a plus and minus out front, but your b value cannot be a negative. B also can't be 1 or 0, so if you ever got those, you would know something's wrong. So in this case, we get b equals 2, and our final equation is y equals -4 times 2 to the x. Remember, if b is a fraction, it has to be in parentheses. If it's not a fraction, it's your choice. Sometimes I like to just always put it in parentheses. That way you're in the habit of doing it. All right, we're going to pause for, we'll say, 4 minutes for you to do the next two questions. See if you can do 7 and 8. All right, for number 7, start with y equals 5 times b to the x. Sub in your 2 for x, your 1.25 for y. Divide the 5 over, you get 0.25, and take the square root, you get 0.5 for b. 0.5 is the same as a half, so you could do either y equals 5 times 0.5 to the x, or y equals 5 times 1/2 to the x. If you did the 1/2, make sure it's in parentheses. And these you can check really easily as well. If you wanted to put your equation in a graphs page, do a Control T, and then just check and see if those 2.05 and 2 comma 1.25 are in the table. If they are, then you can be confident that you got your equation correct. In 8, 3 for A, put in your 3 for X and your 8/9 for Y. Divide the 3 over to get 8/27. Now to undo a cubed, we have to do a cubed root. As a reminder on the calculator, the cubed root is above the caret button. So do Control caret, which is 2 left of the 4. Then you put the 3 in the little crevice there, and then put in your 8/27. So it'll give you back 2/3 for your B value. So we have y equals 3 times 2/3 to the x. All right, the remaining 3 problems we're going to leave for you to do. There's one of each of the types that we did. And finishing those will then finish out your homework. Have a good rest of your day.